So, you want to hear another tutorial, eh? One where you'll learn to do something cool for power-ups and the like? If not, too bad, I'm telling you anyway. By this point, you're definitely familiar with the getComponent function in Unity. It's something you use for just about anything that involves the data from game objects, and there are a lot of interesting things that can be done with it. Now, in this tutorial, we'll talk about the object's material. By first pointing to an object's renderer, you can then access the material by following the function with material. You can then override it with a variable, like in the example here, and when the function is called in-game, the material will change. As for our example, we will be using the Unity first-person template and creating a power-up object that changes the wall materials. Also, one of the materials I'll show is using a wireframe shader created by a GitHub user named Chaser324. The link to his work will be shown at the end of the video. Now, let's jump into the editor and get started. So, now that we're in the editor, as you can see, over here we have the player character, and in this case, our level is made up of two large objects. Now, in order to do this properly, we'll need to have some way to catalog and organize each game object we want to change. So to do that, we will create an empty game object called wallReg, as in wall registry. Next, we'll want to add component new script and call this wall change. Now, opening that, the very first thing we're going to want to do is add a public variable, this being a list of game objects. So we'll do public game object, the brackets to denote it as a list, and we'll call it walls. Now if we go back to the editor, we can see what this has done. So if we click wallReg, we can now see the walls list here. So what we'll want to do is add two array elements in this case, and drag each of our structures into here, like that. Next, we want to go back to our script and create a new function called public void change color. And we'll give it an input of a material called matte. Now, what we want to do is have this list have the function check each part of the list. So we'll do a for loop for int I equals 0. Then for as long as I is less than walls length, so what this does is it's a pretty simple way of checking each element of a list. So what we'll do is walls bracket I. So this is selecting it's selecting the current element of the list. Then we'll use our getComponent function. Point to the renderer, like mentioned before, and material. Now what we'll change it to is the input we've listed up here, matte. And that is our object registry script. Now we'll obviously need a way to both trigger this in the game and set the matte input, which we'll do by making a prefab. So as you can see, I've already made a pickup prefab. So if we go into this, we'll see that it has a sphere mesh filter, a mesh renderer, and a sphere collider. Now, this will essentially be to make sure that we can just drag it in, and it'll be in the game world. Now obviously, it's also important to make sure that the is trigger, is selected in the sphere collider. Now obviously we're going to need a script. So what we'll do is we'll make another new script and call it pick up. Then going into here, we will need to create a couple public variables. First, it will be public material, call it item mat. Next, we'll do a public game object called wall reg. Now what we've done here is allow us to put two things into each pickup. A material that we want to use for our whole wall switching mechanic, and the wall registry that we want it to point to. I think now, we'll create, in the script, we will create a private void on trigger enter. Now, this next step isn't essential, but it does prevent any issue. It does prevent some issues moving forward. So if we go if other.compare tag player. Now what this does is make sure that only an object listed as the player will trigger this, just in case by some accident or just pure oversight another object will end up entering the sphere collider. So in the case that it is a player that touches this, we will take wall reg that we're pointing to, send message. In this case, change color, or whatever you named the function on your end, and put the input as item mat. And we will then destroy game object to remove the pickup once it's been done. And that is it. So what we've done is once the player enters it and the object confirms that it is indeed the player that has collided with it, it will take the wall registry that we've pointed it to and initiate the change color function and give it a material to work with, which incidentally is right here. And the input mat is what's going to be used. So let's try this out. We move a pickup into the scene right here. Now, as you can see at the bottom, we have the public variables of item mat and wall registry. So firstly, we'll want to drag our wall registry into its respective variable. And then we go into materials and select which material we want things to change to. So in this case, let's try gold, a shiny metallic one. And so here we are, we bump into the pickup, and our walls are now gold. Now if we want to make another one, let's put another pickup right here. Like last time, we use wall registry right here, and this time the material will be a glass one I made. And we'll do one more of the wireframe shader I mentioned. So wall registry, and the material will be wireframe. Right, so as last time, we've got the metallic gold. Next, we've got the glass, and the wireframe as well. And so that's really it. With this function, you can essentially just set the material to what you want, and this provides a lot of interesting opportunities. As you saw, it could make things translucent or transparent. You could have everything go all shiny to signify a power-up state. It's a little trick that can be used in a variety of contexts. And obviously, this isn't the only way you could add a function like this. If you wanted to, you could put the function on the player script and have it be activated on a button press, or have the prefab we just created not be a sphere pickup, but instead an invisible trigger that the player walks across. The sky's really the limit here, and this is just one of the many ways that the technique can be done.